but now it's really important to point it out to people because it's still, it's still being used against us at every possible opportunity. I see it all the time. I follow on Google what's been written about us, and all over the country, in fact, all over the world, we are, and Ralph Reeder is, and I am still, those spoilers that gave away the election. This is like total bullshit. It always was, but right now, it's still being used that we are the spoilers, that our votes belong to the neoliberal billionaires and war machine behind the Democratic Party. And so I just want to point out now, so we can debunk that every time it comes up and really punch back, because we have a lot of work to do. The world is going down in flames right now, thanks to both parties. And power has been in the hands of the Democrats, certainly since, certainly at the time of Barack Obama and his election, and they had both houses of Congress. They even had, for a while, a 2/3 majority, if I'm not mistaken. So they could have done anything they want, but what did they do? They basically gave away the store to Wall Street, is what they decided to do. Remember how they were going to, and Obama said this, Joe Biden said this, that their first priority was going to be to put into law Roe v. Wade and protect a woman's right to choose. Well, we've heard about that for decades. They don't do it when they have the opportunity to do it. And, yeah, exactly. So just push back against that. And why did Barack Obama lose their commanding majority in Congress? Because they totally screwed people, because they were offshoring our jobs, they were bailing out the banks, they allowed, 7 million Americans, families, to be thrown out of their homes, one thing after another. So they have no one to blame except themselves for having lost their congressional majority, to having gotten to the point now where it's just 1 or 2 votes, and in fact, of course, they've lost their majority in the House of Representatives. And, look who they supported. They supported Joe Manchin against a very progressive challenger. They went to the mat. What's his name? Jessica Cisneros was the challenger of a very conservative Democrat in Texas. So it was the same thing. They could have had elected candidates that are supported by the people, and they did not. And what did they do to Bernie Sanders, who had a pretty progressive agenda on most things? They basically organized to stop him. So, it would be hard to organize a more powerful, funded, supported campaign than what Bernie Sanders was able to do. So if you weren't convinced before then, you should have been convinced by Bernie Sanders' 2 runs where basically the election was very clearly rigged against him. So it's really clear that Democrats have no one to blame but themselves. And if you look at what's happened recently, the betrayals of People, Planet, and Peace are just jaw-dropping. Whether you are looking at, whatever happened to the public option. Where did the public option go? It was, it got left in the dust. What about the pharmaceutical deal so that we could afford our pharmaceuticals? Well, we've heard a lot of hype about how great the Inflation Reduction Act was because it was going to just change the playing field for pharmaceuticals. But they don't tell you the actual facts. How many people know what was in that bill for pharmaceuticals? This is the fine print. But basically, there will be 10 out of thousands of pharmaceuticals. There will be 10 when? 2025, I think, or 2026? 2026, that there will be cost breaks on 10 important drugs many years from now. And this is what, this is what Joe Biden is going to be running on. This is what the Democratic machine is telling us why we have to get out and support Democrats. Or you can look at the, what was it called? At one point it was called the Jobs Bill. I forget the other names for it, but this was the great package that was going to have social infrastructure as well as physical infrastructure. This was the big combined bill. And because Democrats and Republicans wanted the physical infrastructure, they were going to tether the social infrastructure to that, like child care and elder care and family and parental leave that would be paid for 12 weeks, free community college, all kinds of good things were attached to this bill. But what did? They allowed the parliamentarian, someone who's not elected and has no power, they suddenly made the parliamentarian so powerful to say that, oh no, you couldn't link these together. Chuck Schumer used that as an excuse to divide the bill so that Democrats and Republicans could pass the infrastructure bill, which is what they passed, and then suddenly they didn't have the votes to pass the social infrastructure bill. So all these good things that they had run on suddenly became impossible. Then at the very 11th hour for Congress in their ability to pass meaningful legislation, at the very last moment, Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer put out this bill, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. They put out this bill at the very last moment, and you know when that happens that there's foul play going on. Because why do they hold bills to the last minute? It's like the way they passed Romney Care here in Massachusetts. It was a 145-page bill, and they released it the night before. So it was like sight unseen by everyone. So same thing for the Inflation Reduction Act. They passed it at the last moment possible so that it really couldn't be scrutinized, because if you actually looked at it, it's mostly BS. This is the bill that pretends to be a climate and healthcare bill. What's the healthcare? Well, it provided more subsidies for Obamacare, basically, to keep that going. Not exactly the kind of healthcare we need. And then it had this little package for pharmaceuticals, which were going to be many years off. So at the last minute, they passed this bill, and it also pretends to be a climate bill. Do you think of it, the Inflation Reduction Act? Yeah, so it's really a fossil fuels first bill, is what it is. Yeah, and it requires, before you can use any public lands for a major project, like offshore wind, for example, before you can do that, or before you could set up solar on unused land or in the desert or something, which is where solar should be. It should not be in our forests. It should not be in open space. It should be along the highways and in our rooftops. They don't enable that. They just enable it to degrade public lands. So this bill says before you can do any major projects for green energy, you first have to, get this, you first have to use 60 million acres of public land each year, 60 million of offshore public waters for fossil fuel projects, for drilling. And then you have to use 2 million acres of public lands for similar drilling before you can use even 1 acre of publicly owned property for a major renewable energy project. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. It is suicidal. It really is ecocidal. It is suicidal, and these absolutely clueless leaders in the Democratic Party are patting themselves on the back and talking about what a great thing this is. is not a great thing, this is terrible. Let me mention also what the Democrats did to working people. What did they do to working people? They basically trashed the right of working people to collective bargaining. They did that. They forced the railroad workers to accept a contract that they had already rejected. They forced the railroad workers to accept a contract that they had already voted down. Why? Because it was completely inadequate. And what's happening to the railroad workers is happening to all workers across the state, across the nation, I must say, and in many areas across. What's that? Oh, absolutely. That is a very good point, because that contract not only abuses workers, because it puts workers' safety at risk, it really it creates incredible risk for exactly that kind of accident to happen. That accident was the product of abuse on many fronts, not only abuse of the workers, but long-term abuse of their safety. And that was on the part of both Democrats and Republicans that refused to upgrade the braking system of those trains. And that was not only the fault of Republicans, that was also the fault of Democrats. And under Obama, they refused to basically restore those protections when they could have. So this was absolutely inexcusable. And we've gone on to see that working people want unions. People want unions, but our unionization is what? It's down to like 11%, I think, if you include everything that is public service unions as well as the private sector. That those numbers keep dropping, even though everyone wants unions. There's enormous support, even in the Republican Party. I mean, it's all over the American electorate now. That people realize none of us are safe unless all of us are safe, and that especially applies to working people. And the last reason why the lesser evil is over is nuclear weapons and war. And it's really impossible to talk about nuclear weapons without also talking about war, because we are in an economy of war, we are in a climate of war, we are in a mindset of war where the military-industrial complex is basically calling the shots. And our elected leaders, with the exception of mostly a handful of Republicans who are doing this for their own reasons that I don't particularly trust or find convincing, they don't want a war with Russia, but yeah, bring it on with China. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not going to fix it either. Both of these wars are basically being concocted. These are engineered wars, and yes, the war in Ukraine is horrible. It is illegal, it is criminal, as all wars are. But if you look at the bigger picture, this war has been provoked for decades, and the consequences of moving missiles, nuclear-capable missiles, which are now all along Russia's border, western border, it was absolutely known what this was going to lead to. And it's no coincidence that the US began dismantling nuclear treaties that enabled them to put nuclear missiles anywhere they want, which is what they are in the process of doing right now. This is going on around China as we are moving our nuclear submarines to surround China, establishing new bases in the Philippines, which the people rightly are rejecting and are really protesting against. So, we, and I don't mean we in this room, let me say the US empire is really driving these wars with complete, not quite complete because of a handful of Republicans, but otherwise it's enormous support, and particularly from the Democrats, where even the so-called progressive Democrats could not manage to muster a letter saying, why not consider diplomacy? And they had to retract that letter. So this just makes a mockery of the suggestion that the Democratic Party is on our side. They are not on our side. They are on the side of the lobbyists and the corporations, the military-industrial complex, the censorship industrial complex, the environmental destruction industrial complex. That's where we're going under this bipartisan leadership. And it's really, I think it's just morally incumbent on us to keep going. And I'm so grateful to this party that has had the foresight for decades about where this system was going. For me, the wake-up call was when the Democrats, on a voice vote, overturned clean elections in Massachusetts. We had campaign finance reform that we brought to this state with overwhelming support in the late 1990s. And it took about 2 years for the legislature, which is overwhelming, it's like 80% Democrats, it was back then too, took them just a few years to repeal it. And that to me was like the wake-up call, that if the Democrats in this state, who are supposed to be progressive, are rejecting and destroying the work of tens of thousands of people, the hard work to pass that bill as a voter referendum because the legislature would not pass it, then they do not deserve our support, and they are not going in the right direction. And what's happened since the 90s? Money and power have only become more and more concentrated into the hands of a few. We are an oligarchy, we are not a democracy, we are a plutocracy, and working people and the environment and global peace and security, and I must say security in this country where we have become a militarized state as well, none of that is going to do well. We are now, we are in a position now where we are struggling to survive when we should be a country in which we all thrive. That is where we should be. We have the resources to do it. We have the insight to do it. It's been known for a long time. It was very well documented. What was it, like 10 years ago? A study out of Northwestern and Princeton, the Gillens and Page study, that showed that public policy is driven by money, period, and has practically zero connection to what people want. I'm gonna just say one more thing, and then I'll wrap up. And that is, if you look at the firepower now in one nuclear submarine, anybody have an idea what that amounts to?
No, because we're not part of the military.
That's right, and they don't want you to know. Exactly, they don't. And the press is completely in bed with the military-industrial complex, so they don't want you to know either. But one nuclear submarine basically contains 8,000 times the entire firepower of the Second World War, the entire destructive capacity. And to put it in other terms, it contains 4,000 Hiroshimas, the equivalent of 4,000 Hiroshima bombs. And that's just one nuclear submarine. We have like another 16 or 17, something like that. So it's really important for everyone to know that we are all in the target hairs of this oligarchy. It's not something that happens over there because it doesn't take very many nuclear bombs today at the size of today's nuclear bombs. Those Hiroshima bombs, those are considered tactical nuclear weapons. You know, those tactical nukes that they talk about so casually and so cavalierly. We don't have to worry about tactical nukes, right? We don't have to worry about Hiroshimas. I don't think so, but what they're talking about now, today's bombs are anywhere from 20 to 50 times the power of Hiroshima, and the targeting works in such a way that A city doesn't just have one nuke targeted at it, it has more like 20 to 50 nukes targeted at it. So you can have basically the explosive power of 1,000 Hiroshimas that could come at any of us. And we have absolutely clueless moral criminals who are running this show, who are playing a game of nuclear chicken, and who are risking all of our lives. We need to throw those bums out, all of them. So, the last thing I want to say is that not only is there an incredible imperative, a survival imperative for us to keep up the fight, we have to keep up the fight, but we have an incredible opportunity to keep up the fight. There is a real vacuum now in political leadership and political credibility, and the American people now are really chomping at the bit. And if you look at polls, which they also don't want you to know about, and they don't do them very often, but the numbers of people now who have rejected the two parties is almost 50%. It's actually 49%, whereas the numbers of people who identify as Democrats is 25%. The numbers who identify Republican is about 24%. So the battle is halfway won. People, we don't have to convince people that they're being completely screwed, that working people are being crushed, that our environment and future is being destroyed, and that our lives are all in the target hairs. I didn't mention the words nuclear winter, but that's the flip side of these really powerful bombs. It doesn't matter where they go off. At today's firepower rates, you only have to really hit one city to generate sufficient debris going up into the upper atmosphere that basically destroys crops. And it would be, I believe it's around 2 billion people who would starve to death, that our agricultural capacity would be brought down, not quite 50%, but almost. So, I mean, this is a death sentence for humanity. We're not going to survive that. In the same way, we're not going to survive it when the Greenland ice sheet or the West Antarctic ice sheet collapses. And we don't know when that will be. The science is not capable of predicting that. But we do know that some major backstops against ice sheets breaking up and falling into the ocean, that those are going. And they're going at an accelerating rate. So, you know, people, planet, and peace are all in the target hairs right now. People are not happy campers, and they are clamoring for alternative political parties, and they have been so abused and abandoned and betrayed, especially working people who really have the power to change our direction now like never before. And, you know, I think the more we can organize our capacity for a general strike and support workers who are striking wherever they are, whether it's at Starbucks or at FedEx or at our hospitals and nurses or teachers. It's really important for us to be as involved as we possibly can with labor, and I'm really glad to see that on our agenda today, we have several representatives of unions and labor and campaigns that I think we need to become as involved with as we possibly can, because it's when we get together across the boundaries of our movements for people, planet, and peace, that's when we really use the power that we have. And remember the words of Frederick Douglass, first of all, who said that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. We need to bring that demand into the political marketplace, into the political discourse. We need third parties. We need the politics of people, not the politics of profit, which is mostly what we have out there. We badly need that, and in the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. So it's really important that we use that power. Remember these polls, because they tell us the electorate is really ready. The more we can do this from the bottom up, the better. Having done the national thing for 2 campaigns, it's very hard to support your gains, even when you have as good a campaign as possible. It's hard to keep it going if you haven't built that kind of human infrastructure at the local level. So that's really, I think, where our focus needs to be. And big kudos and big thank you to our various local electeds here and the people who have run for office. Just raise your hand, please, so we can give you a big thank you for leading the way. And that's where we're going, and thank you all for being here to make it happen. Thank you so much.
I have a speech already, but he's gonna take it from.
Well, I want to be super efficient.
I just want to be real quick. The public option went in the public sewer. And, one more thing, I have, when they did, get rid of the community election law, they did it in the middle of the night while we're sleeping. Thank you.
Good morning, wake up. I'm gonna make this part of it less than a minute instead of 10 minutes. If you're a Green Party member, you have a sheet that's green in your packet. If you're interested in running for any of the offices in the leadership of this party, that's co-chair, secretary, treasurer, director of membership, director of fundraising, director of, help me out, communications, or if you're interested in being a Massachusetts GPUS delegate, that's delegate to the National Committee, or an alternate delegate to the National Committee, gather 10 signatures of other people with a green dot on their name tag. People with blue dots on their name tag can sign for anything except for co-chair, secretary, or treasurer. Is that clear? Get 10 signatures onto these sheets and then get the sheets into us or myself and Gus. And let's say, I'm gonna give you 3 months to complete that.
I'll just get
process. So, go around, get those names, think about running, and then we'll compose a ballot, and then everybody who's eligible to vote has a pink sheet, which will be what you end up voting on. And it's a ranked choice process. So you're gonna handwrite into these your ranked choices of all the people who have achieved sufficient nominations. And that's it for the nomination process. Is there a question? Mike, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple things. We really need a female co-chair. And then also, if you want to run for more than one office, you need more than one sheet.
That's right, and I have a few extra back in the registration room if you need another sheet to run for a second thing simultaneously. Or you could ask somebody who is insisting on being a wallflower to give you theirs out of their packet. Thank you very much.
The panel of Green Rainbow past candidates. That's next on our agenda here. Past candidates. Is the panel here?
Yeah, let's assemble one. Charlene? Yeah. You wanna roll yourself around here? And David, and we're gonna steal, you took the David.
That's fine, we will.
And Gus, if you don't have. Want me to be Gordon? I am. Anytime. So.
Right. Because we can't.
So, Janet, bring Charlene up.
I'm trying to
If only if you guys. I know. Only if you guys.
I'd be happy to, I can speak at a moment's notice. No, I'm fine. I don't think anybody here is doing that.
We're assembling our panel. This shows you, it's like a dance interpretation of how we get nominees for public office. We have to drag them against their will. So welcome everybody. I think we're only 25 minutes late. We didn't start that time either. So I'm having next to me an array of former candidates, many of whom served in public office in Massachusetts at various levels. And I'm going to ask them a few questions, open-ended questions that they haven't really prepared, but I didn't even know they were going to be sitting in this chair until 20 seconds ago, which is really quite beautiful. So my first question, I'm going to ask each of you to take the microphone in turn and just spend a couple of minutes. Tell us your name. Tell us the first office that you ran for. And what was your state of mind when you did that? What were you thinking? What prompted you to go from being an ordinary person living in our society to a person who said, I could run for a public office? Got the cue? Tell us who you are, what you're in for, and what were you thinking that first time you tried to run for public office?
Hi, I'm Gus Steves. I am currently a town councilor in Stockbridge for another month. I actually ran originally several back in, originally ran in 2014. Although I had been on a couple of appointed town boards for a couple of years before that. But as a reporter, I had seen what our town was doing, I had seen how the town government was functioning, and quite honestly, I looked at it like, and I figured that almost anybody really can. The only catch to running for office is doing a little homework in advance, getting an idea of how the system functions, and seeing that you can fit into the way our local democracies work. Because I think the real catch is that a lot of people in our society do not hear a lot about how local democracy functions. Because our educational system is pretty bad when it comes to sales. So it basically has become almost an old boys game. And at the local levels, it's still really easy to get involved because all you really need to know is time. You really need to use time. To be honest, I mean, granted, it's a little bit different at a town the size of Stockbridge, which is about 17,000, versus say a Holyoke or one of the bigger cities, which is definitely much more challenging because you have to get a lot more people. But really, if you're willing to do a little homework and walk and talk to people, you'll get elected. It doesn't really cost that much. It doesn't. And quite frankly, I tried to avoid raising any money because I think it's corrupt. And I'm getting my fair turn. That's it.
Thank you, Gus, for serving and serving your town consistently. My name is Charlene Calogero. I'm from Berlin, Mass, which is here in central Massachusetts. And my thinking process took years. Partly it was because I saw that we didn't have a whole lot of terribly good candidates out there. And by we, I mean our country, our state, you know, who even knew about the local stuff. So I started talking to friends about it, and I thought about the level that I think most Americans think about when they think about politics, which is the national level. And I was like, well, I'm in my, I think, 40s or 50s at the point that I really started thinking about this. And it's like, well, I don't have a lot of time, therefore I should run for Congress and really try to make a difference. Thankfully, I didn't do that. Not that there aren't people who absolutely should do that, but I think that really one of the key questions I had, and I think a lot of people had, is what could I do in a given office? How could I improve our lives and the world? And what would I be good at? And Massachusetts, the state level, does have a training program called the Assistance Legislative Seminar, and one of our chapter members at the time, Brian Moss, had gone to that. He said, you absolutely have to go to this. And I attended in the fall of 2015. And my background, my professional background, engaged education and educational policy at every level. But the state is critical in terms of public education. And what I got out of going to that seminar was, well, I mean, I probably already knew that education is one of the, largest budget pieces in the state budget. And I went to this seminar, and a bunch of state senators talked to us, and they said, you didn't have to be an attorney. I was like, good, because I'm not one. And I discovered that they were mere mortals, and not any smarter than anybody in this room. So I think part of deciding to run for office is what's your skills, your knowledge, your experience, and matching that up with the office. So I started running for public office in 2016. Not a year that people really noticed much of politics. Not a hard thing to do. I didn't win that first race, but it was a two-way race between me and the 20-plus year incumbent, who a lot of people had no idea who he was. And so I'm really gonna put in a plug here. Yes, I think the local level is a great place to run for office and really make a difference. And so subsequent to that race, I ran less than a year later and won for library trustee. And I was active advocating at the state level, and I think that was critical to the unheard of budget. The libraries in this state are way underfunded, shot. But a bunch of us went in without even discussing it beforehand to plan, and said, us library people, we've been too polite for too long. So we got a boost to a line we didn't even ask for. So when people get pissed off and when you are a local official, you can start to make a dent in the state level. So, but the state level, I really strongly encourage people, particularly with experience in education, social services, healthcare. Those are 3 huge budget items. Housing, huge budget items that would really make a difference to lots of folks in our community, the people who've been historically and consistently underrepresented in Massachusetts. And any issue that you care about, what we need is a green, literally just one, to win the state rep seat in Massachusetts, to stand up for a little thing called democracy. Massachusetts state legislators hide their votes legally. People can't believe this when I tell it to them, but they hide their votes. And so all we need is one person and one Green Rainbow person to get elected and stand up when they vote on their rules and say, this is unconscionable. And I think we can win. Thank you.
Thank you, that's hard to follow. I highly respect librarians and educators, and thank you for your service. And I think that the military should be forced to have bake sales for their funding. Librarians and schools should get the money that the military gets. Hi, my name is Michael Lavery. Good morning. It's my first in-person convention. I started running for office in 2016 as well. So I think it was a spur from Bernie's campaign. He asked us all to run locally and not be afraid. So I took that torch and ran with it. I ran for the local select board against a 3rd-generation townie whose mom was the town clerk previously and his dad was in the highway department. So it was unheard of that an outsider, quote unquote, would be someone like that. But it was by mandate because I beat him by 25 percentage points. So. I had some things on my side. I was an organizer for many years and an activist. I helped do digital marketing and phone banking. And more Healy, our current governor, at one point called me personally after a phone banking session on election day and thanked me for making the most calls that day for that party, which I'm no longer a member of. There's other reasons for that which we'll go into, but the reason I ran was at the time marijuana had just become legalized recreationally, and the thought was from the previous select board member who was leaving office that this would be a boon to the tax rolls. In fact, we've seen it in the many articles that this state and others are making billions and billions of dollars using that green money. And cannabis is a green product. I mean, there are some things that are wrong with it, like when you break it down with ethanols and methanes and butanes and that sort of thing. It's bad for the environment. But the green crop, the agricultural crop, and hemp can be useful too. Now that took hold in the 2018 Farm Bill. That's federal. That's 50 states. All states agriculture can grow hemp, which is 0.3% or less of THC. Anyways, I digress, but I did get elected. I've been in my 2 terms now. I was reelected without any challengers. And I'm finishing out my 2nd term in 14 days from today. So I am running for planning board this time around. We got a new trail built in town, 2 EV parking spaces, which have 4 chargers, and I got plastic bags banned in the town all in the 2 terms I've been in office. we're gonna have a wind turbine before too long. We have municipal fiber that's owned by the town, so. Great things are happening in Beckett. I did run for state rep against the 20-year incumbent as well, and I got my name out there. It was a one-on-one race, but the Berkshire Eagle asked me why I was a spoiler. And, you know, how could I be a spoiler when there's only two of us? They just don't get it, folks. Thank you, I appreciate it. I will run again. My name is Mark, and as I said before, I ran for state rep in Boston, and I didn't do too much thinking because Melchuk told me that I was going to run, and I just did what he told me. However, I wanted to plant a seed in that gentleman sitting in front of all from who works for housing. You should really consider running. The work you're doing is great, and you have already a base to work from, so we need you to step up. As well as people who think that they're too old. Here's one, I'm 71 years old, I'm thinking long and I'm thinking long and hard before I venture out. I would do the same thing again, but it would have to be for a reason. The reason that I ran was because my jurisdiction was gerrymandered by Fenner. So I had a reason, I carried a message. It wasn't about me, it was about each person in that district that was going to lose. And I had motivation, fire to tell them, you know what's gonna happen? You're gonna be given a representative. You may not, I want you to sign this so that you have a choice. So that was my motivation. At this time in my life, my motivation is to do exactly what I just did.
So I think we have time for one more open-ended question and hear from all these candidates, and then we're going to thank them for moving closer to being on track with our schedule for the day. So my other prompt that I want to invite you each to comment on, Michael already jumped the gun a little bit on this, but it's okay. I want you to share with the audience the single most positive experience that you took away from running for office. And it could be how you fulfilled some of the 10 key values in your public service, or it could be how you grew as a person by reaching out and talking to all the rest of the members of your community. But I want you to each give a little bit of reflection on what did you take away that was a really positive experience for you.
The most profound experience that I had, which I think is the reason that I'm here today doing everything that I am doing, was when I was at Stop and Shop collecting signatures, and Mel King, who was not that well, limping, came up and helped me get signatures. Maybe rest in peace, Mel King. Yeah. I did give a little bit of the positive values and experience that I had as a candidate. In the latest go-around when I ran for state rep in Western Mass and the Berkshires, I think it was eye-opening to meet folks in other towns and just tell them about the Green Rainbow Party and what we stand for. That it's not this evil thing that's trying to disrupt Hillary Clinton's campaign or something. And what we're doing for labor, for the people, and reproductive rights, and the things that are being taken away from folks nowadays, and largely out of their states, but it could happen here too, right? So you got to keep up the good fight. And I just really enjoyed exposing my politics to other folks outside of my little town in the Berkshires. So I think it's going to be what we have to all do, and get ready, because you're sitting in the seats here. You're here today. You got to run for office too, and we got to put ourselves out there. Thank you.
This is one of those questions I wish I had had time to think My story is very small in a certain way. It was when I was out collecting signatures to get on the ballot. And I got buttonholed by man. Now there's a tradition out in the small towns that you collect signatures at the transfer station. We didn't have transfer stations where I grew up. So this was quite an eye-opener. So this guy buttonholed me while I was trying to collect signatures and talked at me for like 15 minutes. He was 180 degrees opposite me politically, but I listened, I couldn't figure out how to cut him off, partly. But the funny thing didn't happen that day. The wonderful thing happened maybe a week or two later, when I went back to collect signatures to the same Bolton transfer station. And a man came up to me with his maybe 8-year-old son. And he said, I saw you with that man the other week. And I was so impressed. I could tell he was not, your constituent. But I was so impressed that you were respectful and you listened. And he had his son right there, and it's like, this is what it means to be a public servant, to be the kind of person who you would want to vote for.
My experience was kind of similar to that. It was going through, it wasn't specific like collecting signatures, but it was going through the time and seeing how it was actually fairly easy to find common ground with people that at the time the Tea Party was still strong. And they were, it was all the rhetoric about how divisive all this stuff was. But if you really looked at it, the people in the Tea Party that were in our town often had similar issues, even though they didn't necessarily come to it from the same perspective. And if we could talk about it, I think the biggest thing was that we could generally come to some sort of agreement, at least at the local level, of how to address some of these things in ways that maybe at the national level it wouldn't work, but the local does, because you don't need to play a political game like that in your communities. I think that's really important thing. And I thought it was also nice to have an opportunity to bring up some of the issues, and I hope that that some of the other councilors had a chance to think about some of the things that, I know this is kind of wonky from a local perspective, but there's this issue called OPEB, which is on our house. And it is something that has always driven me crazy. Because I think we already pay the retirement funds every year, and yet Wall Street is forcing us to put millions aside for 30 or 40 years. We cannot afford to do that. We need the money to do things, like roads and stuff. We can't afford to do that kind of stuff. And I'm so tired of seeing the way the Wall Street type things have weaseled their way into local government and we are so we get rid of these. This
So thanks again, Gus, Charlene, Michael, David. You are people who have stepped forward. You're not the only people who have stepped forward to reach out to our fellow voters in our communities and make a difference, but we all have, and you've done wonderful things, and I find your examples inspiring. Thanks.
All right, we're gonna have a 10-minute break now, and I would like to invite all the folks in attendance here to come to the tables over here if you haven't had a chance. We've got a silent auction going, got a green rainbow membership.
Oh, yeah, no worries, thanks.
Oh.
Hi, Michael. What's up, brother? Running.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll sign your
Change
papers.
plans, but sorry, I apologize. We're going to accommodate guest speaker cards. So we'll have the break after our next speaker. My apologies. Please turn your seats if you want.
Oh, you're right. No, I am. I'm gonna step back a little bit and run for planning board to try to, help the environment. Yeah, in town, make sure people don't
All right.
dump oil.
Okay. Go on. All right. All right. Dr. Pat Berger is a retired primary care physician who has been active and working for a single-payer government healthcare system for the last 25 years. At MassCare, she has been an active member of leadership as well as speaking across the state, organizing local communities. Sorry. Nothing there of Brookline, Wellesley, and Newton, leading rallies at the State House and working with legislators to pass the Massachusetts Medicare for All bill. Today, she will discuss the MassCare campaign to pass a state bill and act to establish Medicare for all in Massachusetts and support efforts at the national level as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me to come here to speak to you. It's particularly wonderful because Mel King was very much a part of Boston life, and it's a real honor to be part of this one. My name is Pat Berger. I'm actually Dr. Downs, so it sounds funny to say Dr. Berger. And I want to speak to you today about the problems in the healthcare system and how we can fix them. And I want the foundation for a just healthcare system is we need to have, that healthcare is a human right. Everyone, I mean, everyone needs equitable, accessible, high quality, affordable healthcare. So I got involved with healthcare reform near the end of my active being a physician. I think when you're really busy doing something, you see the system the way it's working, and sometimes you don't really stop to think, what is wrong here? It's not right. And I met Marcia Angel, we had a talk, and she got me involved with two organizations, Physicians for a National Health Program, and it's mainly for physicians, but they have a network across the whole country, and they're doing wonderful work at working towards a single care system. And then the local one in Massachusetts is called MassCare, and that's the organization that I've been working in really for the last 25 years. I really, as I got interested in the subject, I really began to become aware of all the problems in the healthcare system and how it affects patient care. So I'm asked myself some of these questions. Why are so many people unable to afford medical care and actually medical bills are the most common reason for going into bankruptcy. I mean, that's a terrible thing. Why do so many people lack access to health care? I mean, rural communities are, hard to find doctors in. You have to travel long distances. That's not really right. And then in the cities and towns where there are sections of low-income people, there usually aren't many doctors or facilities available. This isn't right. Why do Black and brown people always have the lowest healthcare status? As Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King said, of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. And this is what it is. Do we really need private insurance companies? No. No. They act as the middlemen between patients and doctors, causing huge administrative costs, and give the insurers huge profits that come out of the system. Why are community hospitals closing or being bought up they're being bought up by big hospital chains? This isn't right. Why are private hospitals costs rising so much that patients are afraid to go to the ER, afraid to go to the hospital because of the cost? It can be bankrupt. Why is the system so complex? Medicare covers the elderly. Medicaid is for low-income people. Job-based people get insurance through their jobs. And other people just get private insurance on their own. It's a very, very complex system, and it makes it hard to correct because there's so many levels you have to deal with. The latest problem, and this is a very serious one, is the privatization of healthcare. Medicare is the only one really that is publicly financed. Unfortunately, though, part of Medicare, actually 50% of regular Medicare, has now become Medicare Advantage. And this is a totally private system. It has nothing to do with Medicare anymore. It sends you to, your insurance company, and you have the co-pays and co-insurance and the premiums and all that. But they entice people by giving them a few extras, like you can have gym privileges. Well, of course, that will select the people who are most healthy and will have the less cost. So the insurers are making lots of money on this. The last thing in privatization, and it started under Trump, is what's called the REACH program. And this is where private equity companies and venture capitalists are taking over private practices of medicine. And I mean, the idea, these are companies that are out to make money. Medicine is now, for the corporate interest, become the big money maker. And that's why they're creeping into whatever good medical organization we have. If I took, these are some figures that are just hard to believe. People who are on regular Medicare, they get 98% of the cost that goes into the program, and only 2% goes to administration, and there's no profits in that system. If you do Medicare Advantage, 85% goes to patient care, 15% goes to profits and administration. And the new program, REACH, 60%, only 60% goes to patient care, and 40% goes to administration and mostly profits. So these are some of the things that are going on in the healthcare system now. And it's for people like us who believe that healthcare is a human right, the only way forward is to really work for a government-run, and people call it different things. I like to call it single payer because Medicare now has been sort of tainted, so but Medicare for all also, which is fine, or government-run one system. What has been accomplished towards getting a single payer system in Massachusetts? We have a wonderful bill. It's been put out every 2 years since the end of, well, in the 1990s, I think was the first bill. And it's been updated every 2 years. I think it's called an act to establish Medicare for all in Massachusetts. And I can give you the current House, but House is 1239, the Senate 744. The lead sponsor is Senator Jamie Eldridge, who's senator, and there are 2 representatives who are the lead sponsors, and Lindsay Saragosa and Denise Garlick. Dr. Gerald Friedman has been working on the financial part of it. He's at the University of Amherst, and he's been working on this for a long time, and he's a real expert. He's found that savings in our bill would be $34 billion to the state, even just in the first year. It would be paid for through fair taxation. The first $20,000 that someone would earn would be excluded, so we wouldn't be taxed on that. There would be no private health insurance unless this was on operation that is not for healthcare. Seniors will get more services, eye care, hearing, businesses would no longer have to provide their own healthcare plans. This will really help small businesses in particular, because in a small business, the employer doesn't necessarily know anything about healthcare, and it's a real pain in the neck to try to get a good healthcare plan that your employees would be happy with, but won't be too expensive for the owner. So getting rid of the private health insurance companies really will make a difference in that business. In cities and towns, people don't realize that, I did anyway for a long time, that each city and town has to pay the healthcare costs for all the town or city employees. Now, the big towns, that's an enormous amount of money. But under a single payer system, they don't have to do that. Again, that's a huge savings. Unions, they can focus on bargaining and issues that are really important to have them function. They don't have to bargain about insurance coverage, so that's another good thing. And the low and middle income people, they won't have to have the fear of out-of-pocket costs, the premiums, the deductibles, the co-pays that add up, because we won't have the private insurance companies. So, if we could pass this bill, we hope that we can then be the inspiration for other states. And this is what happened in Canada, Saskatchewan, there was one province, and then within 3 years, the whole country accepted. So even though a single state can't capture all the savings, they can, and they have to get some help from the central government to do this. It really will make a big difference. People will see it can work. I think there are a lot of legislators who really believe that single payer is pie in the sky, it can't work. But all the other countries, in Europe and around the world, have some form of a government-run health system. There's no reason why, if we don't really push our legislators, that it can't be done. Other things that Mass Care has done, and it's been kind of fun, since we started doing them, and I think it started in the early 2000s, we've done over 50 ballot questions in different districts across the state, representative districts. And we won every single one of them, every single one, more than 50%. There are a few districts that have had more than one ballot question, and it's interesting that the second one, there's always more people voting for it. So we're moving in the right direction. We have several local hubs that meet together and work on their district, or it may be 3 districts or 2 districts that work together on getting support. We have volunteering in the Mass Care office for doing all kinds of things, fundraising, contacting legislators, writing thank you notes, doing all the things you need to do to keep your conversation running. And we're trying to get more co-sponsors of the bill. And that's been a very big push, and we just had a meeting yesterday, going out to our legislatures, and of course they weren't there. Anyway, we're doing left messages and all kinds of things. And we are asking, we have a large coalition. There's 47 members of our coalition. Others, all different kinds of groups, nonprofits, unions, some Democratic town committees. I don't know if I should mention that here. Anyway. That's all there are. So we're trying to grow that as well, and each one of these organizations can push along as well. So, I think that's about all I really have to say. That's what we've been doing. And my last thought takes me back to the beginning, that the status quo leaves too many people without health care. And it's time to really find a better way. Healthcare is a human right, and everybody needs healthcare, and everyone needs to have a system that provides affordable, equitable, accessible, good quality healthcare for everybody. I know we're running a little late, but. I'm sorry, I really can't, I'm a little hard of hearing and I can't hear you.
Stand up.
Why don't you come up clear and ask the questions so everyone can hear it.
Can you hear me now?
No, actually, the microphone is good.
I think if you come up here, it'll be easier.
I just said that I've been a fan of myself for years, and I was fortunate enough to have it, and in 2021, I had to go through a whole bunch of medical issues, and they basically charged me. That is what single payer should be. And I want to ask you, my question really is, is your plan actually to build on that health system? Because we have this state does have a single payer system. The problem is it doesn't interpret. Because it has pretty strict income requirements, whatever it is. But the system itself is a good one. So what we really need is to make it expand to
I think if we had a real single payer system, it would cover all the people that are on Medicaid now, so we wouldn't really need it. And there are some significant problems with Medicaid. I mean, it's all dependent on how much you earn. So if you change your earning, if you got a better job, suddenly you're cut off, and then you lose all your insurance through Medicaid, and then you have to find another one. There's a lot of churning every year, people going on and off. It's very disruptive to families who have to find insurance coverage for, their mother and their children and their husband or whatever. So it's not the best program. If we could get a true single payer from the top down, it does help. And not all states are able to have Medicaid now. I forget the number, but it's not even half of the states do have a Medicaid program. Yes.
My husband
Good morning. Question, can you specifically describe how it's going to be paid for? Because a lot of pushback I hear is, you say it's free, but the costs push on to this whole bunch of other nonsense. So can you describe exactly where, how the department will push back with what's going to cost everyone more later on? So you could discuss that part of the fiscal aspect, financial aspect.
Well, first of all, you don't have to cover all the costs that our present system has, because we're going to save a lot of money by getting rid of the insurance companies, bargaining with the drug companies, and changing the rules for how they price their drugs in the first place. So a lot of the system will do well because we're cutting out wasted money, administrative burdens, and the profiteering that's going on. So the cost will go down, that's one thing. It's paid for through the tax system, which is based on your income. So if you have a low income, your taxes won't be so much. It's a 10% tax on income. But as I said before, $20,000 is excluded, so it has to be the 10, or whatever's above that amount will be taxed at 10%. Seniors, no, that's not anything. So businesses, I figured this was a question that was a little over everybody's head, including mine. the businesses are most, because, workers are covered.
Workers will be covered by the system, right?
Well, people are covered by the system. The businesses, have to pay, businesses have to pay a 10% tax on their earnings. And it's, again, based on how much you make, so it's depends on if you're big or small. Did I answer your question well enough?
Yes.
I can get you, I can get you more information if you want. Any other questions?
Yeah, right here. First of all, I just want to thank you so much for this. I think one of the worst evils in the world is profiting from sickness and suffering of human beings. And I've had so many issues with, fighting insurance companies. It took me 7 years to correct typos in I have Cambodian children that have Cambodian names. And there were typos in their names, which, through myself, which led to them being thrown off and losing health insurance for 6 months here, until I figured it out and they could not correct the typos. I finally corrected the typos. Somehow all of the providers they were seeing switched plans, so they switched us into a different plan. Now we have the typos in the names again. I'm thinking of just legally changing their names because it would be easier. They wouldn't be losing, one of my children has appointments every single week, and it's very important that we keep with the same providers, and all this stuff keeps happening, and it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare, and there's so many services that we can't access because this doesn't accept this insurance, this doesn't accept this insurance. So the thing that she needs that would heal her, and a lot of people, oh, we don't accept that insurance, I'm sorry, you're just gonna have to die, right? So thank you so much. I just wanted to thank you for what you're doing.
I don't really have a question, but I have a comment. I live in Hoyle, and my state legislature at Duffy is a co-sponsor of it. And I would ask everybody here that has a state rep to make sure that their state rep is a co-sponsor. And so it's, and Lindsay Savinos is our state rep. But another thing is the reason you want your state rep to be a co-sponsor is so that we can, we're in a church, so I can't swear. So we can get the chairs of the health committee to get off their
Bottom.
derrieres and get it on committee, because that's what it's there, they have the bills that you just mentioned, but it's stuck in committee because these two co-chairs won't get it out, and they want to keep kicking the can down the road. So not now, when? And if you do it here in Massachusetts, we can set an example for the rest of the nation, just like Romney here did to make Obamacare. We can set an example. That's all. Thank you.
I think we have now about 70 co-sponsors, but we need a lot more.
Hi, thank you very much. It's very important work. One group that I just want to advocate for and make sure it's not forgotten are immigrants and the undocumented, especially who currently have really rough when it comes to healthcare, if any at all. But in Massachusetts, there's at least some. But I would just like, if you have thoughts on that, I would like to hear them. Thank you.
Absolutely, MassCare, the bill covers all residents. And they would cover everybody. It's not, you don't have to be a citizen, you don't have people who live there. Okay.
Just one more question, if I may. A very quick one. So this might be a little bit of, over the top, or kind of like heads technical, but how does like the work of, like nurses unions and other like medical facility like unions pair with the fight for single payer health?
How do they help with her?
Yeah, do they help? Like, what is the struggle there? How can they help, right? Do they endorse, have they been like generally receptive of single payer?
Unions are divided somewhat about that. I will say the nurses union is magnificent. They are leading the cause, really, and they're very active all across the country, in Massachusetts, definitely. One of the things that they do for us is help give us some money so that we can hire a staff to do the work. And so the unions have been really our biggest financial supporters. I mean, we get money from everybody, but they've been really, really helpful with that. But not only that, they do their own organizing. We need to persuade more unions to join because unions really are paying from this. I mean, everybody paying for this, but unions in particular also. And I've never been in a union. I don't really understand the politics that goes behind it, but maybe are you in a union? Did they support?
I don't, in Western Mass, I think that they're generally receptive, I just like started working as a class worker, so I'm not really too sure.
Well, one thing, people who are working in the union and have a union, you should look into this and activate it because some of the unions did not support it. And we need as many unions as we can get because they're very good at working for our jobs. They are wonderful.
First of all, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for steady work, years and years and years. And I have a question and then a comment. Does Mass Care have a 501c4 division which allows you to endorse candidates for office?
Yes. I want some point. Yes, definitely. We have both C3 and C4.
So we appreciate so much what you're doing, but here to the Rainbow Party, we also have an ask. Some of the most wonderful organizations, such as Mass Care, Massachusetts Peace Action, I can go on and on and on. Even though their positions are more aligned with our party than many others, have either never or rarely endorsed the Green Rainbow Party candidate running for office. And we're right behind you, but we need you to be right behind us also. And to look for the Green Rainbow Party candidates, be in touch with us, ask us who they are, and endorse them. Thank you.
Okay, so ditto the thanks and really appreciate your work, Pat. Thank you so much for all you've done and thanks for being here today. And I apologize, I was in another conversation with that last question, but I think I'm piggybacking on that. So if Danny asked, what the, what Mass Care does with candidates, my question is, do you have particular, what should we say? Are there people who are especially obstructing progress that should be targeted?
Yes, definitely. The Speaker of the House. I mean, he controls what happens, basically. He controls the leadership, and they do what he says, and he definitely is not a single payer guy. We need to target him.
Can you remind us what his district is?
Yeah, he's in, Quincy.
And apologies, though I've been more focused nationally, but who is the current speaker? Oh, the Speaker of the House, yeah.
In Mariana.
Okay, all right, good, yeah.
And then the other people on, the legislative committee that decides whether it goes out of committee or not.
And which committee is it in, can I ask?
Health and Finance?
Yeah. Freeman is.
Healthcare Finance.
I think it's Freeman or Freeburg is one of them, the co-chair, and then there's another one, or something like that.
Well, Brownsburger, I think, is on that.
Oh, is that
Well,
so?
they're not the co-chair, the two co-chairs are the ones that are holding it up, they can figure it out.
Oh, her name is.
Freeburg,
Yeah.
and then the other one is Lamb.
I should know this, but I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to.
All voters should know it.
Next email.
Yeah, if you could just let us know, or maybe you can find it on your website or something, but it would be useful, I think, for us to know who the, particular roadblocks are, because often just by challenging them as single payer proponents, it not only does it get the issue into the election, but it really forces them into the daylight and it exposes them on what they're doing. So even if you don't feel like you can run a high-powered campaign, sometimes just filing and running can help push people and let them feel the heat of, what we need as their constituents. So consider it, everybody.
And what your state reps down there.
Back from that, if we were to run a Green Rainbow Party candidate against Ariana, shouldn't Mass Care endorse our candidate?
Oh, absolutely.
Good to hear.
Thank you for being shorter than me, I have to raise my up. Our next keynote speaker is Alicia Morales. Alicia is a member of the Socialist Alternative and an organizer with the National Workers' Strike Back movement that launched this March. She will share with us the successes and lessons of various campaigns in Seattle, including the election of the first socialist city official in 100 years. Alicia will discuss the Workers' Strike Back plan and goal for building a strong working class movement in Massachusetts. Alicia Morales, por favor.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today. My name is Alicia. I'm a member of Workers' Strike Back, as well as a member of an international organization called International Socialist Alternative. I'm also an education support professional at a local special education school here in Worcester. Like many people in this room, I believe in the power of workers to change society, and the stakes haven't been higher to organize people en masse against the policies of the uber-rich corporations and the growth of the far right. Workers' Strike Back is an independent movement of working class people and youth fighting in our schools, workplaces, unions, and communities against the big bosses and the political servants. We are collectively fighting for winning workers' realities, good union jobs for all, fighting racism, sexism, transphobia, xenophobia, and all other repression, fighting for high quality housing and free healthcare for all. Lastly, we are tired of sellouts and Democrats consistently betraying working class people. We need an independent alternative to the two-party system. We are excited to collaborate with other organizations and independent parties like the Green Rainbow Party today. and as well as in future campaigns and actions that strengthen the rank and file labor movement and other movements such as fighting for real climate justice against corporate-induced climate change. Now, I'm going to give more specific background and attest to the strength of independent campaign organizing and movement building on the streets, as has been exemplified time and time again in the Seattle City Council's seat of Shawna Suwan. Shawna is a socialist alternative member, ran on an independent slate back in 2013, and has been reelected twice, and even beat a right recall against her seat just a year after. Shawna Suwan will not be seeking re-election this year, and is instead devoting her energy and tactics to building a larger national movement for labor and fighting back against the bosses. We don't believe that fighting an electoral front is the end-all be-all way to fight back, but the Seattle working class has been able to win major gains in the last 9 years with the Marxists in office. Shawna only takes the average wage of a worker in her district and donates the rest of her salary to social movements and union strike funds. We think this is a really strong way for candidates to show that they are really for the working people. As a member of Socialist Alternative, I was able to volunteer for the 2019 re-election campaign and the 2021 Defeat the Recall campaign that both resulted in victory for Shawna and the movement, including many valuable lessons for progressive candidates today. And I'll comment in depth on my experience a little later, but just first a little background on Shawna. So she first won her seat with an independent grassroots campaign back in 2013 in conjunction with her and Socialist Alternative's role in the 15 Now Coalition, which also had unions and grassroots organizations. She was the first elected socialist to Seattle office in 100 years and came before the massive national popularity of self-proclaimed socialist Bernie Sanders and AOC. The victory of $15 per hour minimum wage in 2014 marked one of the first significant offensive gains for the working class that was won by a powerful movement from below and not watered down by backward negotiations. The 15 Now campaign was inspired by another movement that people have heard of, the Fight for 15, that was started by fast food workers in New York City demanding higher wages and respect to dignity in the workplace. Shawna stated that the $15 demand marks a decisive challenge to capitalism made possible by linking the power of elected office with the struggle over real movement. Without both, this victory of $15 in Seattle would not have been possible. Almost a decade later, the demand for a living wage has doubled and is close to $30 per hour as Amazon workers in the Northern Kentucky Air Hub, KCBG, are fighting for, along with union recognition and 180 hours of PTO. An important feature of all these campaigns, 15 Now, Block the Bunker, the winning of strong renters' rights legislation, and the Amazon tax, is the ability to constantly develop new perspectives to somewhat predict how the ruling class or enemies are going to attack us next, and always have an offensive strategy planned to expose their greed and undemocratic tactics. In every instance, victorious campaigns of 15 Now have been replicated in other parts of the country, and one in Minneapolis, LA, New York City, and other cities as well. The idea of putting strong gains for working class people in Seattle is to have that victory spread nationally, even if we don't have socialist electeds in every city yet. I also want to touch on how Shawna and Socialist Alternative used the city council seat during uprisings and the Black Lives Matter movement to win material gains against racism and police brutality. When a new $160 million police precinct and training center was being proposed to be built in the middle of Seattle in 2016, there was mass opposition from the community that money would have been better spent on building affordable housing. Homelessness had just been declared a state of emergency in Seattle, yet the city council, while Shawna was on vacation, of course, suspended the rules and pushed through a same-day emergency resolution to advance the police bunker to be built. So representatives can act urgently when it comes to funding for the police, but why don't we ever see that emergency passing resolutions to build affordable housing? This is the difference of having a representative that is accountable to working class people and not corporate interests, instead of representatives who speak progressively but cave under pressure to the establishment. The police bunker was successfully blocked due to hundreds of community members demonstrating their opposition and overpacked city council meetings. Shawna Suwan's office was vocal in this opposition of funding resources for police and organized rallies to instead demand that money proposed for to build affordable homes in Seattle. During the George Floyd uprising in 2020, which became the biggest protest movement in American history, Shawna's office introduced and passed a bill banning the use of crowd control weapons and chemical warfare by police in Seattle protests. Seattle has a long history of police brutality and rapid gentrification, where many unarmed Black Indigenous people of color have died at the hands of police, and Black families are being priced out of their lifelong homes at an astonishing rate. Shama used her role as a city official with a key to allow a Black Lives Matter protest that was led by mothers and family members of police brutality victims into City Hall. During this highly politicized time, there were protests daily in the CHOP/CHAZ autonomous zone was established also in Shama's district. Our socialist office at the same time of this massive unrest against racism on the streets proposed a bill to tax Amazon to fund affordable housing and green infrastructure. Shama's office had previously won a historic tax on Amazon back in 2018, but that was reversed after a week with the help of the Democrats in City Council, who gave into big business and used the sunset clause to end it. But using the lessons from that past campaign, while in a vastly different economic situation, the tax Amazon movement in the Seattle working class will tax on big business that would pull in $210 to $240 million per year to create tens of thousands of green median jobs by building permanently affordable and eco-sustainable affordable housing. This victory was entirely due to the power of our movement and our threat to take the Amazon tax to the ballot if the City Council failed to act. This offensive win is a historic example of the power of class struggle, and it could have not come at a better time. Cities and states across the country were and still are being pushed by extreme austerity budgets and inflation in response to the pandemic triggered budget shortfalls as we entered another deep crisis of capitalism. Other victories in Shama's decade in office have been historic renters' rights protections like a freeze on winter and school-time evictions, the requirement of landlords to top moving costs for tenants with less than 3 months' notice, and tenants at least a 180-day notice before paying fees. Recently in Seattle, they've also ended caste discrimination, which has been a long time practice, specifically with workers in the tech industry with Indian Americans. So just like another protection against oppression, which is really good. So fighting for and winning these gains for working class people conjured up obviously a lot of retaliation from Seattle's ruling class and the establishment in our office used to battle at every turn. It's inspiring to talk about and recall these tactics of a working class campaign that not only was fighting to re-elect a representative with a proven track record, but we fought for a movement to maintain its power and fight for more gains like rent control and public investment instead of corporate development. I volunteered for the last weekend before the November 2019 election, and was blown away by the organized roles and activities that were taken and planned on a daily basis to maximize our reach with everyone in the city. In the final days of the campaign, it was virtually impossible to walk or drive through the district without seeing a poster or sign that read, "Don't let Amazon blow up this election," 2 days left to go for the socialists, or Seattle needs rent control. With 4 days until the election, we set up tables at every major street intersection of Capitol Hill, a key neighborhood of the district with a high concentration of voters living in apartment buildings paying exorbitant amounts for their rent. In the final 3 days, we mobilized hundreds of people across the district, including members of SA and other volunteers, to get out the vote, setting up tables and talking to people, putting up posters and yard signs, and going door knocking from the early hours of the morning until dark. On the day of the election, after a final round of door knocking, we gathered with hundreds of supporters to watch the results come in and celebrate the incredible work of our campaign over the last 6 months. The resounding success of the last few days of this historic campaign was the culmination of months of a massive, sophisticated grassroots organizing effort spearheaded by SA. To win, we knew we had to reach tens of thousands of voters in the district, raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, mobilize hundreds of volunteers, and fight an endless onslaught of attacks for big business and the corporate establishment. So with this political objective in mind, we set up a robust campaign apparatus supported by local branches of SA. A small team of dedicated staff was hired by the campaign with full-time and was organized into a number of teams to coordinate our efforts, which was the campaign leadership team, finance team, social media team, and field team. Our campaign leadership is made up of leading members of SA, including Shama Swan, who maintained a bird's eye view of all facets of our work. This team had to keep pace with the political terrain, not just in the Seattle district, but across the country and the world, where working class people are moving into action against the billionaires. Our starting point in developing our political program and campaign strategy was an analysis of the central issues facing working people in Seattle alongside the broader political terrain. Our grassroots campaign, of course, did not take a dime of corporate cash because the interests of big business are fundamentally at odds with the needs of working people. This means that our entire campaign was funded exclusively by ordinary working people and young people to whom Shama Swan is solely accountable. The hostility from big business towards our movement's victories and demands was on full display in this election, with corporations from Amazon and Vulcan and Comcast putting over $4 million into corporate PACs to elect pro-business candidates across the city. Our opponent in the race, Deacon Orion was one of the biggest recipients of corporate PAC money in Seattle City Council history. However, we broke a more notable record, which was we raised $575,000, more than any city council campaign in Seattle's history, with 7,900 donors and a median donation of just $20. After Amazon dropped the $1 million money bomb, the week that the ballots dropped, the finance team pushed hard to raise thousands of dollars to show that ordinary people want to fight back against this blatant attempt to buy city council. Campaign staff and SA branch members took note of the widespread anger that exists towards Jeff Bezos and executives at Amazon. Rather than seeing this $1 million as a death wish, we recognized that it was an issue we could boldly campaign on. We used it as a rallying cry to our supporters in the district and beyond, reminding people what it will mean for the future of Seattle and other cities across the country if Amazon is able to successfully buy this election. Altogether, over the course of the campaign, we completed more than 8,000 hours of canvassing, knocked out 225,000 doors, spent 2,778 hours phone banking, and assessed the support level of over 23,000 people in the district. Through our canvassing, we registered 1,019 people to vote and drove voter turnout to an exceptional level for a non-presidential election year. We led outreach in the Vietnamese and East African immigrant communities. With our partners in the Vietnamese Senior Association, we organized a meet and greet with over 60 community members that raised $940. We worked closely with a local leader in the East African community who led the charge on registering and mobilizing hundreds of supporters, and received endorsements from many other community leaders. We also, very importantly, registered hundreds of students with the campus drive at Seattle University. It was also this approach of connecting and really organizing with different facets of the Seattle working class and broader cultural community whose needs are historically not fought for in City Hall that boosted our openly socialist campaign. Amazon and the other corporate behemoths headquartered in Seattle can pour millions into election, but it's not strong enough to defeat people power. The subsequent winning of the Amazon tax I discussed earlier, along with the stint of the Black Lives Matter protests being led into City Hall that angered the Seattle establishment and the police to pursue one of the most undemocratic recall campaigns of our time. The state Supreme Court, with no hearing on the truth of the charges, ruled in favor of this right-wing recall, resulting in outright lies appearing on the ballot as the last thing anyone saw before voting. The courts inexplicably stalled their judgment for 3 months, allowing the right-wing recall to carry out voter suppression with an unprecedented winter holiday election, which are typically far lower turnout than general elections. The very same court threw out a recall effort against Amazon's mayor of Seattle, Jen Durkin, less than 6 months before that, after she legally ordered the tear gassing of peaceful BLM protesters, resulting in over 18,000 complaints. As the severe attacks on abortion rights and the racist justice system also clearly show, the capitalist courts are not on the side of working people and the oppressed. Even though this was a fight to defend our city council seat, our campaign went on the offensive while the recall efforts stalled as much as they could to ensure lower turnout and higher odds for them to win. The recall campaign team that were struggling to collect enough signatures, so the Shauna Solidarity campaign responded with going all out in the streets and collecting the signatures ourselves. With the put up or shut up tactic, we collected over 3,000 signatures for the recall we put on the ballot, with Shauna prominently signing the petition herself. We did this to expose the right-wing recall campaign for consciously avoiding putting the question on the November 2nd ballot when turnout would be highest, as other people are also voting for the mayor and many other city and county positions. This tactic helped show, without a doubt, that the recall was attempted voter suppression, and gave further credits to our slogan called the recall campaign right-wing, despite the objections of many rich liberals in the city. While a section of voters didn't initially realize how the recall had a right-wing nature and was connected to the broader right-wing attacks in the BLM movement, it became clear as we confidently called out our enemies and top funders of the recall, which was 130 plus Trump donors, over 500 Republican donors, and of course, Amazon and other corporations who couldn't beat Shaw at our election a year away. This was the most difficult election we faced since Shaw came to office in 2013. Seattle had never seen a December election, a time consciously engineered by the recall to drive down voter turnout among workers, renters, young people, and people of color. A corporate PAC with normally a name of Better Seattle poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into constantly bombarding voters with lies and deceit in TV, web, and mail ads. Meanwhile, the Shauna Solidarity campaign was denied ads by Google, YouTube, and Hulu. Socialists can counter the right by unapologetically fighting against all forms of repression and connecting this to fighting demands that benefit working people. We need to be willing to expose those corporate and even progressive leaders who offer no solutions for the working class, while we organize for clear policies like rent control, increased wages, taxing the rich, and a socialist New Deal jobs program. And just a little more on the ground game, over 1,500 people in District 3 volunteered in some way, many of them filling out pledge cards to discuss the election, turn out the votes of at least 3 friends, family members, or coworkers. In contrast to left electoral campaigns that promised victories based on voting, we told every supporter that we needed them to do more than just vote. And it's this very active, approach that really helps boost grassroots organizing. We asked every supporter we met for knocking a tabling at least 3 times if they would donate to the campaign, stressing the spending of right-wingers and corporate executives. We broke all Seattle records again, receiving over 5,000 donors from within the district. I'm just gonna fast forward because I know we're kind of close to lunch. So all of these organizational achievements were necessary to win, and they all flow from the working class orientation of genuine Marxism. Many activists were also impressed by the discipline of our campaign, which also flows from our revolutionary politics. This was a campaign of struggle, aiming to turn passive support into an active fight against the large landlords, big developers, and corporate executives who dominate the political establishment. And just a little bit about kind of like what we've been up to with Workers Strike Back. Being part of these campaigns for me felt monumental. I've learned so much about grassroots organizing and how it really can never be successful with passive support or lip service for things that working people need. Instead, it's going to take an active, organized fight from the entire working class. We've had a successful 10-year experience with the Fighting Socialists in office, but there's still the astronomical need to rebuild the labor movement into the power it can be to fight the ruling class and win an equitable social society. A couple hundred Democratic Socialist candidates have been elected to office in Shawnee, but it's clear trust cannot be put on the Progressive Caucus, who have backed Biden for his second term and shamefully voted to block the rail strike. Shawnee is a dual member of Socialist Alternative as well as DSA, and recognizes the shameful cover DSA also provides for the Democratic Party. These weaknesses make the Republican Party seem like a party for the worker and against the status quo, which is of course dangerous and detrimental to causes on the left. Building a strong movement in our workplaces and on the streets has historically been a prerequisite for change on an institutional level. The last year saw hundreds of thousands of workers fighting to unionize their workplaces or going on strikes to win a good contract, whether at Amazon or at Starbucks or at the University of California. We saw the historic victory of Amazon workers at JFK Beach in New York City by the newly formed Amazon labor union. And the year before, we saw Striketober, which included historic battles like the John Deere strike and in Seattle, the strike of the Pacific Northwest carpenters, which we were actively supporting and organizing them. So it's been about 3 months since the launch of Workers Strike Back by Shawnee Squad, Socialist Alternative, and other partnering organizations, and we have been busy supporting workers' struggle across the country. Workers Strike Back is on the ground in Kentucky at the KCBG Amazon Air Hub as they fight for a union. Workers Strike Back is on the ground in Kentucky at the KCBG Amazon Air Hub as they fight for a union, $30 an hour, and 180 hours of PTO. And this is also where 5 workers were fired within a month for organizing. It is critical that we build a network of solidarity across the country to support the workers and stand against the bosses. There, Amazon's largest air hub, undoubtedly inspire other Amazon facilities across the country, reinvigorating a movement that began last year with a groundbreaking win at JFK and Staten Island through the Amazon labor union. This will give a surge of confidence to other workers in the logistics industry and beyond. And we're also, of course, gearing up to support an UPS strike if one is called. We've helped organize a network of undergraduate support from unionized graduate students at Temple University who are fighting for a living wage of their own while up against administrators earning 6-figure salaries. We picketed alongside American Airlines employees demanding a contract and an end to the regime of corporate greed and disgraceful underpayment. We joined over 200 journalists in a walkout against retaliatory firings at NBC and stood with nurses calling for safe staffing. We're working alongside rail workers across the country, issuing calls to nationalize rail in the wake of a crush strike, and now increased attention to devastating derailments from corporate cost cutting and skipping on safety measures. These initiatives and more show the type of solidarity and action and class struggle that Workers Strike Back hopes to amplify and strengthen to its fullest potential. There's a couple other national things I could talk about, but I'll just kind of skip through to what we're doing in Massachusetts. So far, we've supported a lot of union struggles at Starbucks stores and other coffee shops, primarily in Boston. And we're currently watching for a possible educator strike locally with the UAW. Last night, 97% of the AW members voted no confidence in the school committee, and the city announced they are introducing a third party in the negotiations. And across the country and in Boston today, we're holding rallies to defend the right to strike. As the conservative Supreme Court is hearing a case that would allow companies to sue unions for striking. We are having a meeting and discussion on defending the right to strike tomorrow here in Worcester at 2 p.m. at Elm Park. I encourage everyone here to attend and get involved in the fight for a lifetime of workers' rights. And as always, thanks for having me today. If you like what you heard, check out our table, grab a flyer for tomorrow's event, and yeah, open up for any questions.
So wonderful talk, thank you so much. Couple of things. First, it'd be really great if we can amplify your remarks. And if you are okay with writing, your notes, your written transcript, it would be really great for us, I think, to circulate it and just share the power of all the run-up to Workers' Strike Back and what we're doing now. Really great. So I want to throw that out there if you're able to share.
Yeah.
Talk. Okay.
Yeah, I can definitely share with the Green Party. I think we also took a video of the speech too, so we could also circulate.
Oh, good. Great. Thanks. And then also my question, I know in the past, Socialist Alternative has done really great work, and we've collaborated on many campaigns, especially at the local level. And I guess that's my question now. If there are candidates who are running basically on a Workers' Strike Back platform, because there's an awful lot of overlap here, I guess that's my question. Have you figured, and I totally respect that you're organizing outside of the electoral realm, and that's kind of Shauna's decision, to do that, and that's really important and fills a critical void. So this is not to detract from that, but actually to amplify it, and to use the electoral process in key elections to help lift up, the fight that you're fighting and that we're fighting together. So there's my question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, like we explained, Shauna's been in office for 10 years, has been able to do amazing work and really attest to when we do actually have, independent candidates that are fighting for corporations. And there's definitely, that was meant to inspire more people to run. I think for now, Workers' Strike Back is very young, and we've been very busy, of course, with all of the workers' developments. But I think we would definitely open the door for candidates to run on an independent seat or on a Green Party seat. We'd definitely be interested in getting to know the Green Party candidates here in Massachusetts, because I don't know, we don't know really too much about them personally. I know Socialist Alternative, we endorsed the past in the past two presidential elections, we endorsed Joe Stein and Abby Hawkins. But yeah, so we definitely be open to inspiring new independent campaigns, but there are any in the works at the moment. Sorry.
I didn't think you knew that.
That's actually why I put this in the
I want to thank the organization for being here today. I know you come from Rhode Island and
I've come from Worcester, yeah.
Because it was really very inspiring. And it's nice to see a sort of a new group coming into Massachusetts. And perhaps your experience in Kashana Swan's experience in Seattle can give us some direction. It has occurred to me frequently that we have a lot of incredibly good, well-organized social movement groups here in Massachusetts, but we are all operating still pretty much in silos. And it seems to me that the movement in general, whether it's across the country or here specifically in Massachusetts, needs to have almost like an ongoing, coordinating, organizing group of progressive groups who clearly, flatly are not going to be taken over by the Democratic Party and do strategy and relationship building in some kind of council. I keep thinking a little bit about what I read about the the CIO back in the 20s and the 30s, and how they brought the various craft unions together to create a much stronger program. I think we need some of that, not just here. My great fantasy, which will never happen while I'm still walking this room, is that there'd be a New England Progressive Council that would really take this region and move it ahead and be an example like Washington and Seattle is in this country. But thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, like that's what, like one of the aims of Workers Straight Back is, like it's not really like an independent movement in the streets, and that's how it starts, like that's, like it's from the ground up. But I think it would be important to have, like a coalition of organizations that will stand firmly on, like not letting working class people be bought out by the ideas of like the Democratic Party, of course, and not the Republican Party either. And like also like working together, especially with like labor developments in the state. I think the educators too, I would love to see you guys out there if they do go on strike or at different rallies. I know I've seen the Green Rainbow Party at the nurses strike last year, so that's very awesome. And I think that's definitely where we can have similarities. I think we should like work together for bigger things in the state. That'd be awesome.
Any more questions?
More of a comment, or a reminder that, what I've noticed, down in South America, like especially in, not Peru, Venezuela, is that the candidates that do run and help the people ultimately in the end, come from organizations like you. And the party works together, like as a coalition with that. So I just wanted to say, we are always welcoming anyone who wants to run for, especially local and state office, because local is where we have the most power. So if any of you are members, or you know of anyone that you align with in your coalition, please let them know that if they do want to run, that we are very, very happy to welcome them. And thank you so much for your presentation.
And just piggybacking on Elizabeth's remarks here, I wanna add that over the years, we have seen efforts to build coalitions come and go, and what can I say? There's just so many forces that are working against us. It's hard enough to do our own work, let alone build a coalition. It's really hard. So sometimes on the way to getting to a coalition, we collaborate on the ground, and that's a really great place to start. And I just want to add that observing different groups, we all kind of focus on different pieces of the pie. And one thing that the Green Rainbow Party does is learn how to fight inside the electoral process. And that's not like, that alone is not going to get you there, because you really have to be out in the streets. But because we've been so busy trying to fight within that electoral process, and they make you go through so many hoops, as Shauna knows, they really try to hold you back. So sometimes we come together with different areas of experience and expertise. And when we start doing that, even just collaborating on specific union drives or specific candidate elections, the key is, when we get together, then we really become an unstoppable force. So thank you so much.
All right, everyone, food's here. We have an hour to eat. Please, folks who are seeking nominations, please turn in your nomination forms to David Spanico or Gus Steve. And please, after the meeting, we're walking around and schmoozing. Please take the opportunity to go to our wonderful guests at tables, silent auction, Green Rainbow Membership Committee, Workers Strike Back, Worcester Independent Socialist Group, and Teamsters Local 170. Thank you. That's it.
One more thing, and I'll say something a little later. Musicians in the audience, we're gonna play some music after, it's gonna be open mic style. Come and just sing a song, or maybe have somebody accompany you. I'm gonna play, and if there's nobody there, I'm gonna play for an hour and a half. But Brian's got some songbooks, so we're gonna do a sing-along, if you know that book. Or Rise Up Singing, what was that? Yeah. So we got that, and I've been working on Joe Hill, that has to be part of the mix. So, we.
Should I end this one? Should I end this one? I don't know who's running it. Maybe John.
John's end the stream. You could start a new stream. You might as well, I guess.